Welcome back, friends. So I still don't have a Metacycle as there is no demo vehicle available to ride. So today we're going to talk about some news, and we're going to have to use a little bit of imagination and stimulation. A simulation. Metacycle Part 4. Welcome back, friends. I hope you're doing well. Hope everybody's been safe. I am back with another video, and guess what it's about? You guessed it, the Sondors Metacycle. Now, I don't really know how I became the niche content provider on this topic, but sometimes you just gotta play with the hand life deals you. This is the fourth video that I've made on the Metacycle, and you know what I've learned from all of the previous videos? Is that, wow, my houseplant has grown a lot over the past few months. Can somebody in the comment section please name this plant? Just name the plant. I wanna give it a name. I'll put the name right here on the planner. Okay, so let's get to the point. I've been talking with Sondors about test riding a Metacycle, but they don't currently have a demo vehicle available. The prototype that everyone has seen was shipped to China to prepare for manufacturing, where Chinese engineers are probably just figuring out the best way to copy it and make it for cheap. I was told that as soon as something hits the US soil, I'd be able to test ride and check it out. So until we can get our hands on one, we're gonna use some good old simulation to better estimate the performance of this bike. Now, if this sort of thing scratches your fancy, did I say that right? There's a link to the first video that I made where we estimate the performance and range of this bike and go through a series of calculations. I've also got links to I've also got links to all of the other Metacycle videos that I've made right below. But first, let's talk about some news related to the Metacycle for the last month and a half. Feel free to hit those time links below and skip if you want to go straight to the simulation section. So let me pull my script up. Was brought to my attention that Sondors has been sending emails to people asking them to turn their $100 chump change deposit into a full $5,000 purchase. It's time to nut up, Buttercup. Now, for some of you, this cost is, just equivalent to a night out on the town. I'm sure someone here has thrown the equivalent of a few Metacycles in the strip club on a crazy night. And for others, this cost might be, a few paychecks worth of savings, and that's okay too. Regardless of your situation, if you got this email and you paid the money, you are in the running to get your bike delivered by the end of Q3. Now, the fine print does say may be subject to delays. Now, if you don't pay this amount in full or select a payment plan, you will be removed from the waiting list, and that's it. Well, here's to hoping you guys in the first 1,000 orders get your bikes by the end of Q3. Leave a comment below if you got this email from Sondors and bought the bike. If you didn't and you're sad about it, leave a comment too. All right, moving on. I ran across some information about the gauge display that's used on the Metacycle, which further leads me to believe that Sondors is using a motor and motor controller from QS Motor. So this is the display on the Metacycle, and this is the DKD display side by side. Here, the DKD display is shown in a package together with a motor and a Votal controller, which we also believe is being used on the Sondors Metacycle. And I believe that Sondors is using a QS Motor hub motor that's been repackaged for their custom wheel. Now, this display is supplied by SIA Ecosys, who happens to be a subsidiary company of QS Motor. They have several clients. I'm sure you'll recognize a few on this list. They also manufacture the ever-popular CT22 display, which can be found on the Onyx RCR, Huck Cycles, and more. In fact, SIA Ecosys is a collaboration of over 80 parts suppliers. So long story short, it's possible that Sondors is offloading a good chunk of engineering and manufacturing to SIA Ecosys, who claims to be a one-stop shop for prototype builds, testing, parts supply, and OEM mass production. So here's one more up-close look at the DKD display on the Metacycle. And last but not least, here's some news that broke on May 7th in case you missed it. Sondors is improving the seat of the Metacycle to make it thicker and more comfortable after receiving customer and test rider feedback. I think it says a lot about the company that they were willing to listen to customer feedback before even producing a product and make adjustments, so that bodes well for all of the consumers out there. The bike's onboard charger also received an upgrade and is now rated at 15 amps or 1.2 kilowatts of power. Powered from a standard US wall outlet, it can completely charge the Metacycle's 4 kilowatt hour battery in under 4 hours, versus the previous charger, which was rated at 10 amps and would likely charge your battery pack between 5 and 6 hours. So they've shaved some time off of charging. The last little bit of news here is a passenger foot peg upgrade. Yes, you will be able to carry a passenger on the Metacycle. This is a bolt-on upgrade which should hopefully be easy to install. And I found out that the Metacycle is rated for 400 pounds of capacity. So that includes the rider, passenger, cargo, whatever you want, but it's rated at 400 pounds. All right, now we're gonna jump into some Metacycle simulation. This could all just be a simulation right now. Nothing's real, but we're going to simulate the Metacycle running the WMTC, which we'll talk about in a second, which is a standard drive cycle that's been adopted by the world. This simulation will give us energy and power use over a 3-part test that simulates a mix of city and highway riding. Now, we're going to run the test with a single rider, and we're also going to run the test with a passenger and then compare the results. Then we're also going to check out 0 to 60 times based on the information that Sondors has given. They claim a 0 to 60 time in about 6 seconds, so we're going to look into the data to check this. A little bit of a background on the WMTC. What is the WMTC? Well, it's the World Motorcycle Test Cycle, which is a system of driving cycles used to measure fuel consumption and emissions in motorcycles. Now, the WMTC was established under the United Nations World Forum of Harmonization of Vehicle Regulations, also known as WP29, blah, blah, blah. In the last decade, the rest of the world has begun to use this test cycle as a standard, including Japanese manufacturers Honda, Kawasaki, Suzuki, Yamaha, also manufacturers in Brazil, Chile, Indonesia, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, India, and manufacturers in Europe also use the WMTC. Now, the US does not use WMTC, they use the local FTP test, but the WMTC is optional. So this test cycle just allows manufacturers to show how their product will perform and gives them some kind of universal standard to use for that, right? Because everybody's commute is different, everybody rides differently, so it's just a universal standard that can be used to show performance. And manufacturers will actually take this WMTC data and run their bike on a dyno to perform this test. Check it out. This is what the WMTC data looks like, right? So this is time versus velocity. There's 3 different parts to the WMTC, right? Part 1 is mostly lower speed city riding, right? Sub 40 mile an hour top speeds. Part 2 is still city riding, but has increased top speeds, okay? Everything is sub 60 mile an hour, but you can see here, right? Acceleration, deceleration, peaks of, 40, 50 mile an hour. Part 3 is really your highway riding profile there, okay? You've got speeds between 60 and 80 miles an hour, okay? You're just kind of bouncing around between that range, some acceleration, deceleration between those speeds. Take these 3 different parts and mix them together and call this the WMTC combined. This 3-part combined test cycle will last for 1,800 seconds. So this will be 30 minutes of riding. So we're gonna wrap this whole simulation up in a Python script. So I'm gonna write some Python code, and we're basically gonna take inputs such as the mass of the Metacycle, right, which is the weight of the bike plus the rider. We're going to use a CDA or drag value, right, that we've approximated based on the shape of the Metacycle, and we've used CAD software to do that. Then we're going to calculate the sum of the forces that are required for the Metacycle to travel at these speeds and accelerate based on the data from the WMTC, right? So we have that velocity versus time data from the WMTC. So we want to see what power is required from the Metacycle to perform this test. So once we've calculated the power needed at all of these different points from the WMTC data using basic physics, we're going to then use numerical integration. And we're going to integrate that power over time to determine the amount of energy that is used. All right, so here's the Python code. So we've got all of our inputs here at the top. We're defining those. And then here, we're basically just looping through, and we are calculating the power required at all of these different points in the test cycle. And then we are summing up the energy that is used over this entire test cycle. It's 44 lines of code. I could probably make it more efficient, but I don't care about that. All right, let's get some results. So we're gonna start with the weight of the average American average American male, which is 198 pounds. And the Metacycle weighs 200 pounds. So this is gonna be about 398, almost 400 pounds of weight. So we're gonna say 181 kilograms. Plug in that value and let's run the simulation. The results are in. So the Metacycle traveled about 18 miles running the WMTC combined cycle with a single rider. The Metacycle uses about 1.776 kilowatt hours over this cycle, which is approximately 44% of the 4 kilowatt hour battery. Or it used about 25% of the total energy storage, or quarter, if you have the 4 kilowatt hour battery and the 3 kilowatt hour accessory battery add-on. So the average energy per mile value for this profile is about 98.66 watt hours per mile. So riding continuously with this profile, you're gonna get about 40 miles of range with the standard battery and about 70 miles of range if you have the standard and the add-on accessory battery. Just keep in mind, your real world range is gonna be even less than what we're calculating because we're not accounting for any losses, we're not accounting for headwinds, we're not accounting for a grade of the road slope. Okay, so let's look at the same exact test, but this time with a passenger on board. And this is all assuming the average weight of an American female, which is like 170 pounds, but don't go ask your girlfriend how much she weighs, okay? I'm not liable for any slaps that occur when you go ask that. And for what? To run Metacycle calculations? Who's gonna believe you? Remember, your limit is 400 pounds. Okay, so running the WMTC combined with a rider plus passenger, the Metacycle uses 1.948 kilowatt hours over the test cycle, which is approximately 49% of the 4 kilowatt hour battery, or approximately 28% of the total energy storage if you have the standard and the add-on battery. Average energy usage per mile is about 108 watt hours per mile. So with the passenger, you're using about 4 to 5% more battery capacity than you would be riding solo. Okay, so we need to talk about a little data disclaimer here. After running the simulation and looking at the data, I noticed that the Metacycle is not actually capable of running the World Motorcycle Test Cycle. Given the WMTC data, certain power requirements are needed, right, to achieve these velocities with respect to this time. In order to accelerate to these speeds in this amount of time, you need this much power. Metacycle has a peak rated power of 14.5 kilowatts. So this graph shows the power required by the WMTC that the Metacycle cannot achieve. All right, so see that enclosed area there? The nope zone? Yeah, that's what the Metacycle is not capable of achieving. The same goes for top speed. So check out this graph, right, where the red line shows the speeds that cannot be achieved theoretically by the Metacycle in the nah bruh section. These are the highway speeds that are above 70 miles an hour. So 70 miles an hour is pretty much your absolute theoretical max speed given the peak power of the Metacycle. I'm not saying that this is necessarily a bad thing. I'm just saying that the Metacycle is not capable of performing the WMTC test cycle. So I did end up running the simulation as if the Metacycle could put out 1.5 times its rated power to perform the test cycle. In reality, you would use less energy than the results that I gave because the Metacycle is not capable of accelerating and hitting those top speeds in the cycle. So I could try to alter the script and rerun the test and cap the Metacycle off at certain points in the test cycle so that it's not possible to perform it in the way that is required. But honestly, who cares? Honestly, does anyone care? I don't care. We're just having fun. We're just having a good time, you know? I mean, that would be absolutely nerding out. That would be the icing on the cake, but we're not gonna go there. All right, are you still with me? If so, let's move on to 0 to 60 times. I created a 0 to 60 calculator that uses an array of inputs such as peak power, peak torque, mass, wheel diameter, gear ratio, and is also using the force equations that we used in the simulation. So we're taking the range of 0 to 60 miles an hour and we are calculating the maximum theoretical acceleration based on power and torque through this range of speed. So I wanted to try out this calculator on, a couple other vehicles that have defined 0 to 60 times to see how accurate it really was. I know there's a fudge factor in here. I mean, it's not gonna be 100% accurate, right? We're gonna have to test this out real world to get meaningful data, but hey, we can try at least. Take the 0 SRF, for example, and let's plug those values into the calculator. So the 0 SRF should get a 0 to 60 time of 3+ seconds, approximately. If we plug in a peak power of 82 kilowatts and a peak torque of 190 Newton meters, plus the mass of the bike, plus the average weight of a rider, and the wheel diameter, gear ratio, etc. The calculator gives us a 0 to 60 time of 3.06 seconds. It's pretty close, right? Let's try something else. Let's look at the Onyx RCR, which has a claimed 0 to 30 mile an hour time of 4 seconds. So we plug in a peak power of 5.4 kilowatts, we plug in a peak torque of 182 Newton meters, we get the wheel diameter, the mass plus rider. We get a 0 to 60 time of 8.33 seconds. So 0 to 30 in 4, and 0 to 60 in 8.33. Again, not too far-fetched. So I need to go test ride an Onyx, check it out, gather some data. Back to the Metacycle. Sondors originally claimed a 0 to 60 time of a few heartbeats, okay, whatever that means. Are you running a marathon or are you laying around on a Sunday afternoon napping to a NASCAR race on the couch? That was really specific. Okay, what that sounds like to me is we don't really know what our 0 to 60 time is, but we want to hype people up, all right? It's a few heartbeats. Now, if you ask Sondors what their 0 to 60 time is, Leon or whoever's answering questions will say that it's about 6 seconds, but that could change as they finalize things during testing. Let's plug them values in. We've got 14.5 kilowatts of peak power, 176 Newton meters of peak torque. We've got our mass in there for a single rider. We've got the wheel diameter. We've got all of our force equations for drag, coefficient of friction, you name it. Our theoretical 0 to 60 time is 10.95 seconds. And yes, I did double check this, but if someone out there wants to run the numbers as well, go for it, please. Please double check me on this. I wanna be wrong. I wanna be wrong here. This calculator assuming that peak torque is constant through the entire range of speed, which is not true. So as the RPM of your motor increases, your torque will begin to decrease through the range of speed. In other words, these 0 to 60 times that I gave you are probably even more than I quoted. In fact, they have to be. Okay, so let's wrap this video up and move into the performance conclusions. And just remember that yes, this is all theoretical. And yes, I probably sound like an absolute dingus for even talking about any of this, but you can find good nuggets of truth in the math. It doesn't lie. Okay, conclusions. Number 1, if this bike truly has a peak power of 14.5 kilowatts and a peak torque of 130 pound-feet, don't expect a 0 to 60 time of 6 seconds or sustained speeds over 70 miles an hour. To hit 0 to 60 in 6 seconds and to be able to hit 80 mile an hour, you need more than the power and the torque that is listed on the Sondors website. Okay, conclusion 2, it is possible that this bike is capable of more than Sondors is stating, but if it is, they got a little ahead of themselves and there's a discrepancy between the stated specs and the stated performance of the bike. So it's possible that Sondors is sandbagging through software limiting and they're limiting the performance. I mean, let's say the Metacycle's using the parts of a QS273 hub motor. Okay, that motor has seen more than 20 kilowatt bursts of power in the field. So it's possible that you can push more power than Sondors is claiming through this motor, and maybe you can unlock that via software. As soon as there's a bike available to ride, I'll be able to data log and prove all this out. We'll have real world data. That being said, this is hopefully the last Metacycle video that I'll make until I can actually get my hands on one. And that's gonna do it for this video, guys. If you like this video, consider smashing that like button, pulverize it. It's right down here. Leave a comment, leave some feedback. Let's talk. Did you like the video? You don't like the video? Are you getting a Metacycle? Think you're getting it in Q3? Maybe, maybe not. And go ahead and hit that subscribe button for future videos. I got more content on the way. It's just taking me longer than I thought it would. Thank you all, and please be safe out there.